My name is Nikki Anderson, and I am the co-founder of a company called Loyalty Ops. We are an operations-focused education and advisory firm. We advise CEOs and executive teams on installing operating structures that improve execution as companies grow. We also educate and license advisors and consultants to deliver that same structure to their clients. For today, this is the first workshop in a series of weekly workshops, and each session will be about a specific operational challenge we see inside organizations across industries. We'll teach a simple framework, tool, or exercise to help overcome that challenge. These are designed to help both leaders within their companies improve their operations and to help those who help those leaders, our consultants and advisors and coaches, to provide them with structures, obviously, to help them in their own businesses, but to help their clients as well. As organizations grow, we all know work becomes more complex and more connected across teams. The number of decisions increase substantially, and more people become involved in each one and impacted by each one. A small team can quickly align in conversations, check in via Slack, and keep things moving relatively quickly. But as we add headcount and teams get larger, that team requires a structure to stay aligned. A team of 5 can decide in a few minutes, right? Quick Slack message, hey, just checking in. Is this good to go? Great. But with a team of 50, you need shared expectations and you need to move at the same speed. As complexity increases, more work tends to depend on a small group of people. Your OGs, as we call them, your originals, the people in your team who have the most context and information and decision-making power. Decisions move upward and teams begin waiting before acting. And this pattern repeats itself across teams, departments, and functions, which causes delays and slowdowns within an organization that you might not necessarily feel on the surface. And the resulting symptoms you'll experience are things like missed priorities, rework, assumed expectations, client work inconsistencies, etc. A manager can prepare a plan and then wait for approval before moving forward and need multiple check-ins to make sure that the plan still aligns with priorities with the leadership team. And this can happen across multiple teams. And as you grow, it's a cascading snowball. Leadership brings decisions and priorities and plans and problems downwards into meetings each week. And one person or a small group tends to set that direction, resolve the trade-offs, and make approvals for next steps. The teams then leave with clarity and yet seem to return the next week with more questions and challenges and bottlenecks. And over time, the entire organization depends on a small group to move forward. When work depends on one point, what we call centralized control, momentum slows across the organization. Teams begin to wait for direction instead of acting with confidence. Leaders spend way more time answering questions and less time building systems and moving the company forward. And strong team members hesitate because they're not sure what they can own. The constraint is how work is coordinated across the organization. We call this the coordination layer that sits beneath and above your operating system. It includes decisions, priorities, goals, and how teams work together. And this pattern shows up across the company in meetings, in projects, and in day-to-day execution. It's not one issue, it's how your system operates. Organizations improve execution by changing that coordination layer. Decisions move closer to the work, and priorities are owned at the right level. Teams act within clear expectations and coordinate across each other, across functions and departments. And that structure allows work to move fluidly without waiting at every step. As I mentioned earlier, centralized control is really a centralized small group that makes the vast majority of decisions and sets most priorities. This is a top-down model, and it works really well early on with small teams and new startups because communication's simple and fast. You have those OG team members who keep things moving. They hold the context and the cultural DNA within themselves. But as we add headcount, that same structure becomes the bottleneck for growth. A founder may approve hiring, pricing, and priorities, but over time, the volume of decisions and workload that lands on their desk increases substantially, and that cascades into delays within the organization. In what we call decentralized command, we have decisions and priorities that are owned at the right level. Teams are acting with clear expectation and coordinate across their functions. A department leader can own hiring within their function, within a defined structure with clear expectations. Work continues without waiting, and accountability stays very, very clear when we have this system set up. Now, the operational structures are the things that create the guardrails here. You'll have alignment and clarity at the top, but what we really need are those guardrails to help people move forward so they know what good looks like. Teams can act with confidence, and that structure defines how work moves and how decisions are made, but it allows autonomy for individuals to own their role and own their decisions. So clear guardrails include priorities, defined ownership and escalation standards, shared standards on how work is done and what good looks like, and clear escalation paths. Teams move faster when expectations are clear and consistent. So here's an example of decision ownership in practice. We've got a strong organization who defines how decisions happen before they happen. So every decision fits into one of three categories. We have independent, where the decision is owned by the person or the team fully. They don't need input or approval. They can act or report, and it's part of their normal cadence. Then we have aligned, where input is required. It might be a quick approval, some input or collaboration, or information from other functions within the organization. But the decision itself still remains with that individual or team member. And then the final group we have is escalated. This is where that person does not own the decision at all. They have to escalate and get approval, sign off, or have the decision made by someone else. And it's really important that they understand who they need to go to, who has that decision ownership, and if they have to align with anyone else before going to get that final approval. And when we have this structure, it removes hesitation and really helps people act with clarity. Unclear ownership, shifting priorities, which we all know happens all the time, weak communication, which does not necessarily mean less communication, and delayed feedback often appear together as a group. These are connected, they influence each other. Improving one part helps, but what we really need to do is improve the system to create consistent execution. It's the system for how work moves. So when work moves continuously in a well-structured organization, we see decisions, priorities, and projects flow through teams without bottlenecking and stopping in one place. Teams can coordinate, maintain momentum, and progress doesn't depend on a single individual, right? So this is where we see the team of teams model, where each understand what good looks like, they work together, and are able to move forward with strong authority and autonomy. Now, the first exercise I want you to think about is where work slows down in your organization. Think about a real situation within your organization where you tend to see slowdowns. This could look like challenges in terms of priorities, understanding priorities. This could be required escalations. This could be multiple meetings where a decision just isn't made or clarity is missing. Something recent and specific within your company. Next, I want you to take some time and write down your assumptions, your understanding of what's happening and where the work is slowing down. So you can grab a piece of paper, you can open up a Google Doc, you can even just do this in your head and start to think about who was involved, who's waiting, whether the purpose of the decision or the activity is clear, and whether next steps are actually defined and documented. And I really want you to focus on a recent, real, specific example when possible, because this is going to allow you to gain so much clarity on the types of problems you see. And if you don't have an example in your head right now, which I would find a little surprising, because even in really well-functioning organizations, this is very common. The next step would be to Interview and ask a few of your team members, hey, I'd love to hear an example of where you see a slowdown in your organization, in your function, in your role. Who's waiting? What are you approving more often? And start to pull those answers out from within your teams. The next step is identifying patterns. So I want you to look at this beyond the surface level from that 35,000-foot view and look for patterns like dependency on one person, unclear ownership, unclear priorities, lack of confidence. These slowdowns typically come from a lack of structure. It's not an effort or a person or an issue on that front. It's a structural issue. So really think about the components of the structure that are required, not your rock star player and the others not living up to those expectations of the rock star. In this second exercise, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the role-based design on the roles responsible for moving forward within your organization. So some roles we all know experience more friction than others. And I want you to focus on roles that have to frequently wait or escalate decisions, where they're constantly looking for validation, confirmation, approval, and decision making from others. Those are the roles I want you to focus on. You're going to list those key roles on your sheet of paper, on your document, or in your head. And then I want you to consider, where are we seeing these slowdowns? Is it in tactical decisions? Is it showing up in meetings consistently? Do they not have access to the person enough? And I want you to look at the structure surrounding them: meetings, communication, standards, role clarity, those components that are important for them, where you would store information or gain information in context or get decisions made. And start to jot down your notes around and thoughts around what this looks like for you now. Now we're going to take a moment to map this out on your document. You can see an example chart on the screen here, some roles, the specific friction point where work slows down, and what the role depends on to move forward. This could be a key person. This could be a meeting. This could be documentation, precedents, whatever that is for that specific role. And you're going to start to notice patterns beyond the symptom. This is what's going to allow you to see a much bigger structural issue than focusing just on individual roles. This is where we see the biggest gap, is people will focus on role definition and description individually and never stick back to see the connection between roles and departments and functions within your organization. They're all interconnected. The next phase of this is to redesign one shift. And this is from your assumption, not being in the role. There's another piece to this we'll get to next. What should this role own in your assumptions, right? What should their priorities be? What decisions should they be able to make without having to escalate? And a great example, I worked at a marketing agency for a long time, would be a content creator. How much authority do they have to push content out and publish without editing and approval from the marketing manager? Right? Do they have to get the graphics approved from graphic design? Do they need legal to review before publishing? What are those components? What do they need? And what should they be able to do themselves without approval? Let me look at what prevents that from happening today. What are the bottlenecks? Legal slammed and too busy to get content back, right? They're manually approving. The marketing manager is overwhelmed. The marketing manager isn't a copywriter, and so they make misses and it needs multiple rounds of revisions. What are those components that are really stopping them from getting what they need? And the next step is a structure that would support it. Brainstorming what guardrail standards, frameworks could give that role more confidence and authority to act independently. And not all roles are going to have full independence. We, of course, need our checks and balances, but there is some certain level of execution that we need to let move forward and empower so our team members can learn and grow. They can gain more responsibility and move up within the organization and deliver better results. And so really start to brainstorm some of your ideas here. An idea could be for legal, it could be a form submission as opposed to a manual check, right? Or an email, or a marketing manager approval. It could be a weekly blocked time with the content creator to go through things together to move work forward. Further, it could be only if we're talking about these specific topics do you need to escalate. And then let's look at what a good week looks like, right? How does strong performance in this result role appear each week? What decisions do we want to see made regularly? How much work do we need to be moved? What does good look like here? And what you'll see is that result that we have, that expectation of what good looks like, sometimes doesn't actually meet the reality of what authority and power and information and context you've given that specific role. And so if we want social media to be driving impressions and going viral and getting tons of engagement, we're not going to get that if we're not testing, if we're not pushing a certain volume of content out, for example. Finally, the last component of this exercise is field work. And I hate to leave you with homework, but this is a really important component of this exercise. Is go and speak to those roles. And if you don't do this regularly, I do recommend a quarterly conversation or some sort of structured cadence that you have within your teams. It could be a skip meeting, it could be popping in for a quarterly one on one, it could be management level, but I do recommend getting right down into the nitty gritty of these roles if you're seeing these structural issues and really pulling out where does work slow down for you, letting them describe the friction. Don't come in and blast your assumptions on them. Really be open to listening to their perspective. This is where you're going to validate your hypothesis. What decisions do you wait on and from whom? This is going to allow you to see where work flows and where there's potential role challenges, bottlenecks. And then what would help you move faster? Getting the team to come up with solutions and own these solutions is really important. We can provide great direction and guidance and let them know that we've tried something and it didn't work. But ultimately, we want their feedback because they're the ones doing the work. So they're going to have a different and likely much more clear perspective of what a potential solution could look like for you. And you don't have to make the decision on the spot. This is really about collecting data from each of these roles and making better decisions as an organization once you have that data and analyze it. So some discussion questions to think about here are, where does work slow down most often in your organization? We chatted about this earlier, but I do recommend taking some extra time to sit down and jot down, hey, let me think about all the functions and list the departments and areas and team members within my organization. Where do I know that there are bottlenecks and slowdowns after my conversations on the field? Where do I now know there are additional bottlenecks and challenges, and really start to document this out? Because that, again, is going to give you a bigger systems level view than just focusing on one specific role. What causes teams to wait before acting is another great one. Is it approvals? Is it they don't have a standard? Is it legal? Is it compliance? Is it XYZ? And as you start to jot those down, you can start to think about what structures could support those different functions or issues and allow work to move through them more seamlessly. These can be things like better communication, right? Streamlined communication pathways, form submissions. It could be a new meeting, a different meeting with a different set of priorities. It could be a briefing document. There's many different ways to solve this problem. Your organization is going to be unique, and you may already have some structures that just need minor tweaking to help support that flow of work. Where do projects stall or restart? This happens a ton in organizations, and it's one of the key things that we're brought in to help resolve. Is we set priorities, we have our quarterly goals, we know what we're tackling, we provide the plan to the team, and then it stalls and information's missing. And it turns out we can't do that, or we don't have the resources for that, or it didn't work part way. So we're going to tweak it and change it. And it tends to just be this pattern where every weekly touch point you have to check in and say on track or off track, it's on track until all of a sudden it's off track. Because we didn't have enough information. We didn't really investigate the plan, the structures to support the plan, and the people behind it. And then I want you to spend some time thinking about what distributed ownership or decentralized command, whatever term you want to use, would require for your organization. Where are there opportunities for you to improve structure within your organization? What would need to be clear universally across the organization? And then within those departments, in terms of priorities, standards, authority, escalation, communication. And then this understanding of, okay, this is what we would need for our team members to be able to execute with confidence. Here's where we're seeing the bottlenecks and gaps. Here's where we're seeing the stalls. Here's the people who are most often waiting or being waited on. Now we can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and build out a structure that supports our teams and the workflow. The key thing is that execution moves when clarity and structure are aligned. Teams move faster when ownership and expectations are clear. We know this. And reducing dependency will improve consistency across the organization. Many people start to struggle with this concept, thinking that if I take that key person out, we're going to lose consistency because I'll have multiple people doing it, multiple decisions. But when we have that clarity and we have that structure paired together, we see consistency rise across the organization. Now, of course, there's challenges and bottlenecks that pop up, right? We're not perfect, but it's much faster to move through and improve when we have those two components, the clarity and the structure. Now, before we wrap up, I want to take a minute to just, how do you consider what's one stood out to you from this session? Are you thinking about something differently? Is there a change that you're wanting to make based on this? And the goal, of course, is not to solve everything all at once, but to start to see the structure clearly from that 35,000-foot view and understand that there is a better way than centralized control. We can move to decentralized command and allow people to have empowerment, authority, decision-making power, and build speed within our teams. Now, if this is something that you want to continue working on, there are a few ways we can go deeper. This workshop is one part of a broader system of weekly workshops that we're providing, and each session focuses on a different structure that supports execution. I will provide the link to the workshops so that you can take a look at the different opportunities and problems that we're solving and see where you'd like to register to join us for another one. And you're welcome to join any session that's relevant to you. They're all free. You can attend one, you can attend all, whatever makes sense for you. And feel free to share with anyone who you think this would be relevant for. So, final steps. For leaders, this is something to consider installing within your organization. This week, we focused on the higher level model that we're talking about. And then each week after this, we're going to talk about the specific functions and structures you can put in place to unlock bottlenecks. And so if you were looking for more tactical, install this framework into your organization, that's what the following sessions are going to dig into now that you have a broader understanding of the decentralized command model. You can use today's diagnostic exercise to identify bottlenecks in your teams. And I would start with one, right? Instead of trying to change everything all at once, focus on one structured shift that you can make to improve execution within your organization. For the operators and advisors in the room, you can use these frameworks with clients to improve coordination and execution and performance within teams. The diagnostic works really well when you're working with a leadership team or even within management and functions within an organization to surface those challenges that they're facing and really provide guidance and structure to allow them to unblock those bottlenecks. If you'd like to jump in any deeper, of course, explore our upcoming workshops, and then you can book a conversation as well if you're interested in chatting more about what we offer, how we can help, or exploring some of the resources that we have for you. I appreciate you joining us today, and I hope you join us for another workshop coming soon. Thank you.